Hello, friends. It's great to have you with us this evening for this special presentation. The Revelation War, Countdown to the Tribulation. What is the Revelation War? It's the war that started when certain rebels chose to rebel against the creator of the universe. It's the war between good and evil. And it's the war that's been raging ever since then. And the Revelation War is really the end of that war. It's the final, most impactful portion of that war. And it just happens to be taking place right now. The tribulation, well, you know what that is. That's the 7-year culmination to the Revelation War, to the end of the age, in fact, that will bring the return of Yeshua Messiah. So this is a very important subject for all of us. What I hope to do tonight is basically give you an overview from the book of Revelation to show where we're at right now in the course of these events. I'm going to just read this. Countdown to the Tribulation. The purpose of this presentation is to provide the big picture overview of events of Revelation 1 through 8 and their fulfillment up to the start of the Great Tribulation. Time will not allow us to bring in all details and documentation of every point. For more details, please refer to our On the Road to Zion Revelation series and my book, Announcing Judgment Day. We do have documentation and lots of it. We have hours upon hours of it, but to cover this much material, I can't really prove every point I'm telling you. I'm just trying to give you the big picture here, and for more details, refer to these sources. We're going to get started now with Revelation 1 through 3. And we'll look at that first in the New American Standard Bible, which is a lot like you will find in any standard English Bible. The revelation of Jesus Christ, which God gave him to show to his bondservants the things which must soon take place. And he sent and communicated it by his angel to his bondservant John, who testified to the word of God and to the testimony of Jesus Christ, even to all that he saw. Blessed is he who reads and those who hear the words of the prophecy and heed the things which are written in it, for the time is near. Well, we have a question. And a lot of times people have a question when they read that. Can soon be 2,000 years? And no, it isn't. Soon can't really be 2,000 years. Not when you're writing to people who only live maybe 70 or 80 years. Soon is not 2,000 years. So is there another way that this could be put that is true to the original language? Well, as we look more closely into the original language, we see that the word soon actually refers to quickness. It means that when it does happen, it happens speedily or quickly. It doesn't mean it's about to happen. And I think that's an important difference in the verses. And then the word kairos. That is a set time, a definite time that it's talking about. And the word or the term at hand, that means ready. And of course, there is no punctuation in the Greek. And the word for here actually means because. So if we go back to the verses and we make those changes, this is what it says. This is the revelation of Yeshua the Messiah, which Elohim gave him, to show to his bondslaves the things which must happen quickly. Blessed is he who reads and those who hear the words of the prophecy and keep the things that are written in it, because the set time is ready. In other words, what it's saying is those who read the prophecy and keep what it says will be blessed. And it says, because the set time is ready. So it's not talking about the believers of all time. It's talking to the believers when the set time is ready. So this was not written the way it's often translated, where it's just general for the many ages. This is actually written for the bond slaves in the days when the set time is ready. So that is at the start of the end times. That's when this prophecy begins to be fulfilled, at the start of the end times. Now, really, if you read the book of Revelation, this becomes very obvious that it's talking about a specific point in time. And it has to be the end days, because the events in the book of Revelation lead to the return of Messiah, which by definition is the end of the age. So what we've shared here is just simply in harmony with the rest of the book of Revelation. Well, how does this help us knowing this? Well, we want to look at this fixed time that it's talking about, and the time when everything is ready. The book of Luke gives us the clue from Yeshua Messiah, where he says that Jerusalem will be trampled down by the Gentiles until the times of the Gentiles are fulfilled. So the Gentiles have been trampling upon Jerusalem for nearly 2,000 years. But in 1967, Jerusalem was liberated by the Israelis, by the Jews, ending the Gentile times so far as Jerusalem is concerned. So this sets a fixed and definite time that Messiah gave us to know when the times of the Gentiles were filled to the full, and that final generation would begin. He said, most certainly I tell you, this generation will not pass away until all things are accomplished. And he even includes his return in those things that he says would be accomplished. So we know from this, we know from history now, when the end of the age began, and that was June 7th, 1967, with the liberation of Jerusalem. So using that information, we can look at Revelation 1 through 3, realizing that the events it portrays there are actually prophetic of things that started in 1967. And in those chapters, it shows us Yeshua Messiah appearing as the great high priest. And it shows us 7 menorahs, which are 7 assemblies. In other words, picturing all the assemblies in the world at the time that this last generation began. And why was he there? Why would Yeshua, in the function of a priest, be wandering through all of the assemblies or the churches of the world beginning in 1967? Well, it's because judgment begins with the household of God. This final generation is a period of judgment, and the judgment has to start with his own people, with those people who profess him, with that system, in fact, that claimed him. So what did he find during those years? Well, he found the religious system to be sleeping, dead, or worse. Not that there aren't believers there. He wouldn't be bothering with it if there were no believers or followers. But that religious system itself, well, wasn't looking so good. And really, as you read through Revelation, the first 3 chapters, and you read his admonitions and even his condemnations there, you can't help but see how they fit the modern day religious system. He said, "Repent and do the first works, or else I'm coming to you swiftly and will move your menorah out of its place unless you repent." Of course, the menorah stands for the light of Yeshua that is carried by each assembly of his people. And so he's actually saying to that religious system, if you don't change, I'm going to take your menorah away from you. You will no longer be representing me. You'll no longer be representing my light in the world. And that's very serious. Very serious. This was going on, though, for a long period. Let me remind you, this judgment period was a period of 40 years, just like Israel in the wilderness. You'll also find there in Revelation 1 through 3 that overcomers are urged to rise above the apostate religious system to follow him. This word reappears over and over and over again in these first 3 chapters. Nikeo, which means conquer, overcome, prevail, get the victory. And it's pretty universally translated here in these first 3 chapters as overcome or overcomers or those who overcome. And this really sets up what Revelation is all about. Right here in the beginning, what you have is a separation of those people who claim to be followers of Messiah. There are those who are the majority that really are in apostasy, and they're urged to repent, but they're also told if they don't, that the light they have will be taken away. And then, though there are the few, the overcomers out of each of these assemblies who are urged to rise above that system, to overcome and to win the victory. From a certain point of view, it is these people, it is the overcomers, who are a central theme to the book of Revelation. In fact, at the beginning of Revelation, it mentions that this message was for the bond slaves. And the overcomers are those bond slaves who persevere to the end to overcome. Revelation doesn't just quickly pass over that either in these first 3 chapters. As a matter of fact, as we read there, we find that there are 7 grand rewards that are promised to the overcomers who persevere to the end. And they're also told that it's going to be war all the way. Well, how have things turned out? 40 years of judgment have revealed that the church system is part of the world, not the kingdom. So is incapable of accomplishing the divine will. Now again, this is not meant as a condemnation of any individual, but the system itself is unable to fulfill the purpose of Yeshua Messiah. His purpose, as he himself stated in John chapter 17, also Ephesians chapter 4 speaks to this, His purpose is that there be one united body of Messiah in the world. And yet the church system is divided up into endless denominations and groups that will never agree with one another and truly follow Messiah as his people. So the church system can't possibly fulfill his purpose. So at the end of that 40-year period, the menorah would be taken from the church to be given to the overcoming remnant. That 40 years ended in the Hebrew year beginning in 2007. That's when the judgment of the church system ends. Now, a lot of this, you may find you need more details about this, and this is in my book. It talks about this a lot more, and also in those radio programs. Well, now we go into Revelation 4 and 5, and we find at the end of that 40-year judgment period, things move and change very quickly. This is what John writes. Revelation 4:1. After these things, I looked and saw a door opened in heaven, and the first voice that I heard, like a shofar, speaking with me, was one saying, "Come up here, and I will show you the things which must happen after this." Now notice the words here indicating that this is moving in chronological order. It's very important to realize this. When it says after these things, it's talking about after the events of Revelation 1 through 3. In other words, the judgment of the churches. And then he's about to show us things that happen after this. So Revelation here is moving in chronological order. And it's important for us to understand this because dispensational theology would tell us that these things have been going on since 2,000 years ago, and that there really is no real order to the book of Revelation. But that isn't true. It is moving in chronological order. So as we look at this, we're going to continue to see how this moves forward. Now, I would just like to mention that, of course, if we're moving now through time chronologically after that 40 years period, the year that started in 2007, in the spring of 2007, ended in the spring of 2008. Now this is what's called a Shemitah year, that year, a year of release. And in the spring of that year, I had really an amazing experience. And it was an experience that seemed as if the door was opened and I entered right into heaven to see these same events that John saw. Now I see this as a vision that I had that was as if it was real, but I don't really know exactly. I do believe about these events that these are pictures of real things. In other words, this is written in symbolic language about real spiritual realities. And we're going to look at some of these. I also want to mention that this was a very important year, 2008. And I've explained this in radio program number 301, Chariot on the Move. And this is Ezekiel's prophecy. And this prophecy can be shown very clearly to be a period of 2,730 years in which Israel would be scattered because of their iniquity, and that this iniquity would come to an end in the year 2008 AD. So right in time now for Yeshua to turn his attention to the remnant of Israel, the scattered remnant of Israel. Quite amazing timing. Well, this is kind of an interesting picture. Now, I have to say what I saw actually didn't look very much like this. This is kind of giving you some placeholders. And this is a picture of Revelation chapter 4 and 5. What had happened at that time is that there was a judgment court that convened in heaven, and that's what these events in Revelation 4 and 5 depict for us. And there was a case that was brought before that court, because now that the judgment was over with the religious system, it was actually time for the world to come before the court. There's certain facts that are unfolded here in these chapters as we read them. One important fact, probably the number one fact, is that Yahweh is worthy to receive glory, honor, and power by virtue of being the creator. That he has rights as the creator to his creation. And there's an indictment that follows from that regarding Satan, the fallen angels, and the world in rebellion. That they do not acknowledge Yahweh as worthy of the glory, honor, and power in their lives. Instead, they behave as gods unto themselves and essentially treat his creation as if they were the creator. And here's another fact. Yahweh owns all creation. It says there, you created all things, and because of your will, they existed and were created. So again, the rebels claim effective ownership of his creation, and they selfishly grab all they can. And we can see that in so many ways as we look at our world today. Here's a couple other facts that come up while this is being considered before the court. Yahweh has made covenant promises that must be fulfilled. All of these covenants involve Israel. And this is the principal reason why the 24 elders of Israel are shown as present at this judgment. They're representing the interests of Israel and the covenant. And fact number 4, it follows from the perfect and holy nature of Yahweh that he must resolve all issues raised by the rebellion and must set all matters right in his creation. This will satisfy all issues raised in the sight of the 4 live things who are there from the foundation of the world. So there have been observers throughout history, and they have watched all this unfold. And there has to be a righteous judgment. If there is no righteous judgment, that means evil will never be dealt with. And if evil is not dealt with, that means suffering and sin and death will go on forever. So the time came for the judgment court to sit, and it did. And these are the issues. As things unfold, we have Revelation 5:1. It says, I saw in the right hand of him who sat on the throne a scroll written inside and outside, sealed shut with 7 seals. So what we see here is the scroll in his right hand. And in the Greek, that literally means lying on his hand, as if to invite someone to come forward and take it out of his hand. And this scroll is his royal decree that actually offers the solution to all of these problems that we've just looked at, and contains the full judgment that must come upon the rebels, and the rewards that must come to the overcomers, and of course, the outcome of all of these things. In this action, he's as much as saying, this is my royal decree written from before the founding of the world. Here is my judgment that will solve all issues arising from the rebellion. This is what is so amazing about this, that he had this solution already before he ever created the world. He knew that free will would cause these events to unfold, but he also had the solution to that before the world was created. And this is our amazing, all-knowing, and all-powerful Creator. However, there is a problem. It goes on and says, I saw a mighty angel proclaiming with a loud voice, who is worthy to open the scroll and to break its seals? No one in heaven above or on the earth or under the earth was able to open the scroll or to look in it. And I wept much because no one was found worthy to open the scroll or to look in it. Who is worthy to open the scroll? This is amazingly profound. It's worth thinking about for a long time and praying about, because there's no one in all of the creation who is worthy to open the scroll. This would seem to be a non-starter, wouldn't it? Without someone that can open the scroll, the solutions can never be applied. This is the state we once were in, friends. And I think we may have even felt that personally. Of course, then one of the elders stands up and he says, don't weep, stop crying about this, because the Lion, who is the tribe of Judah, has overcome. Now it uses that word, has overcome. He who opens the book and its 7 seals. So there is one who is worthy, the Son of God. And he is worthy to open the seals. I saw in the midst of the throne and of the 4 living creatures and in the midst of the elders a lamb standing as though it had been slain. Our Passover lamb, Yeshua, Messiah. He is worthy to open the scroll. Then he came and he took the scroll out of the right hand of him who sat on the throne. So after all onlookers declare the righteous and perfect judgments of the case, the Lamb goes forth to unseal the scroll and unleash its judgments upon the world. This actually happened and began in the spring of 2008. Now we're going to consider these scroll judgments, but before we do, let's take a closer look at the layout of the court in heaven. The heavenly court, now this is from my book, Judgment Day, explaining this. The heavenly court is arranged a lot like your living room might be set up to watch the big game. You've got your big flat screen TV centered against one wall of your living room. That's something like a sea of glass, similar to crystal in this setup. As host, you've got your big stuffed chair arranged directly across the room from the TV. That's the throne. On either side of your chair around the room, you have other seating for your friends to come over and watch the game on TV with you. That's the 24 elders' thrones. You have lamps placed strategically in the room to provide light for your friends. That's the 7 lamps. At the appointed time, your invited guests take their seats in your living room, and all eyes are soon fixed on the TV screen to watch events in real time that are happening hundreds of miles away. That's the appointed time for the appointed events of the judgment meeting to begin on planet Earth. Finally, there is the big game they are all focused on. The big game that heaven is focused on in the crystal sea is you and me. It's the overcomers. All heaven is watching the overcomers. This is our moment. This is our time to create an eternal testimony. And I think when we understand that, as we move into Revelation chapter 6, it helps us to understand the context. In Revelation chapter 6, we have Yeshua removing the first seal. It says this, "And I saw when the Lamb opened one of the seals, and I heard as it were the noise of thunder, and the first of the four live things saying, 'Come and see.'" Now my book explains this in detail, but what we see in this Revelation vision is four live things, and these are called the angels of the presence that are around the throne at the 4 points of the compass. And it's about to tell us about these horsemen. As a matter of fact, the first of these, we'll call them the angels of the presence, is speaking here. The first of the four live things saying, "Come and see." And he's about to do something. What you see around where these angels are, who look like various kinds of creatures in the vision, they send things out on the winds, on the four winds. And this confuses people sometimes. What is this about? This is really a symbolic picture of how the angels execute the divine will in the world. And the winds are actually a picture of the divine influence that goes out into the world. So you can kind of picture these angels releasing things into the winds. In other words, these are influences that are going out throughout the world to accomplish Yahweh's purpose, his providence. And what we're going to see with these four angels is that they release four horsemen as these seals are removed. Next it says, "Behold, a white horse, and he who sat on it had a bow. A crown was given to him, and he came forth overcoming and to overcome." Now, many versions here, for some reason, leave the overcoming theme and instead have the word conquering. And you might wonder, why do they do that? Because it's exactly the same word. The only meaning that we've had for the word so far is overcoming, and yet they changed the word here. The reason they do it is because they have a concept that this must be the Antichrist. So they changed the word to something else. But that's entirely arbitrary. And if what we see is that from the very beginning of Revelation, it's set up a theme of what happens to the overcomers, then it's very misleading to us to change this word right here. So the correct word is overcoming and to overcome. And I'm going to show you more about that. But let's look at some of the features here. It mentions a white horse, so we're going to look into that more in a minute. It mentions a bow, which is obviously an implement of warfare, and a crown. This is the Greek word Stephanos. This is also, besides meaning crown, this is the Greek name, Stephanos, or English Stephen. There's a wreath or garland, which was given as a prize to victors in public games. Now, wouldn't that be a good way to represent an overcomer? Someone who is already a victor. He came forth overcoming. He's already a victor. No doubt having come forth from that judgment on the churches, having overcome. And to overcome, there's still more overcoming to do, is what it's saying there. Now, we have some indications regarding the nature of this white horse rider. In Revelation 17:14, it's talking about when Yeshua returns and the war against the evil ones in the earth. And it says, the Lamb will overcome them. And it says, they also will overcome who are with him, called and chosen and faithful. And in Revelation 19:14, it says, the armies in the sky followed him on white horses, clothed in white, pure, fine linen. So actually, the interesting thing here is that the overcomers who return with Messiah are riding white horses. So the only white horses in the book of Revelation are these white horses, and of course the white horse on which Messiah himself is riding. So the correct understanding of who a white horse rider would have to be one of these overcomers, who in fact came forth overcoming. So that's a pretty big clue. A forerunner sent out first of this group. Does that account with other things in Scripture? Well, of course it does. Malachi 3:1 says, I send my messenger, and he will prepare the way before me, the messenger of the covenant. So the Lord is specifically saying he's sending a messenger before him. And in Malachi, it goes on to tell us who this is. Malachi 4:4-5. Behold, I will send you Elijah the prophet before the great and terrible day of Yahweh comes. Notice it's before the great day. All of this fits very well with the white horse rider at the removal of the first seal. It's interesting that there's an understanding about this from very early among the Jews. Sirach, which is an apocryphal book, says this: Elijah was ordained for reproofs in their times to restore the tribes of Jacob. And Yeshua agreed with that, saying Elijah is coming and will restore all things. So we have ample evidence that the one to go out first here is his messenger, coming in advance of the things having to do with the coming of Messiah, having to do with the great day. Yeshua then removed the second seal. Now, these were all removed very rapidly with these horsemen. They all went out very close to the same time. And these next three horsemen are all forces of the world. Whereas the first horseman is really sent out to the scattered remnant of Israel because it's for Israel, represents Israel, as we've seen from those verses. The next three are really forces of the world. And what this means is something kind of amazing. What it means is that essentially by removing these seals, Yeshua is simply allowing them to do what they want to do. And what they want to do isn't very good, as we will see. So when he removes the second seal, the red horse comes forth, and the red horse rider, and says, to him who sat on it was given power to take peace from the earth and that they should kill one another, there was given to him a great sword. Now, I should tell you that when I first came to understand all these things, and this was all given to me, this was in the spring of 2008, I immediately recorded radio programs, many of them, through the summer and through the spring and summer of 2008. And at that time, I committed myself as to who they are. And one of the things I talked about was environmental warfare being unleashed. Environmental warfare is a fancy word for weather control. And I talked about how this could be a great sword given to the red horse rider. Now, let me see if my message will play here.
Being given a great sword at this point suggests some new kind of weapon or some new kind of capability that is put into the hand of this rider at this particular point in Yahweh's great plan. And we notice the effect of this great sword is that he's given power to take peace from the earth and that they should kill one another. Well, what could possibly be this new kind of weaponry that would result in peace being taken away from the world? It could be various types of conventional weapons and even what we call weapons of mass destruction, such as atomic weapons. But we've had all of those weapons for quite a long time. However, even though it's been under development since the 70s, and we've seen that, environmental warfare has just now come of age. It seems like it has just now been put into play on a massive scale. And so I see environmental warfare as being a very, very important factor here, and possibly even being the great sword that is given to the red horse rider.
Well, that was 2008. There was an earthquake, a major earthquake in China in 2008, and some strange things were documented, including these weird rainbow clouds. Just before the earthquake broke out, there were a lot of reports of these sorts of things. And as a matter of fact, China themselves blamed the use of the HARP program for the earthquake. And this was in the news. So we might wonder if environmental warfare has been used since 2008, what evidence is there that this red horse is riding? In other words, that these things are continuing and growing in the world. Well, let's take a look at some of the things. So what we just saw was an amazing escalation. You know, in 2008, what people were concerned about was the HAARP facility in Alaska. And if you remember back during those times, there was a lot of concern about that facility. And what you see in this video we've just shown you is the proliferation of these ionospheric heaters that actually have the ability to heat the ionosphere, and through heating the ionosphere, manipulating the weather. And these antennas can actually aim this to various places, can bounce this off of the ionosphere, and can, through this, influence and control the weather. Keeping that in mind, we have this article from 2011 where Ahmadinejad of Iran accused Western countries of causing drought in Iran using this technology. It's very interesting what's been going on just recently in Iran. I mean, currently and in the period of the last few months, as you probably know, there are heavy sanctions, economic sanctions on Iran right now. And they have been having essentially Armageddon-like weather all across Iran. And the thing about this kind of weapon is you cannot prove who's using it. There's no way to actually tell. So while people may be suspicious, they can't prove it, especially with so many different ionospheric heaters located now on different countries around the world. One thing we do know is all of the strange weather we've been seeing since 2008. Record-breaking weather. We are getting like so used to hearing record-breaking having to do with the weather. Over and over and over again, everything is record-breaking. Here's an example. A tornado record broken in 2011. Superstorm Sandy breaks records. The deadly Oklahoma tornado, the widest tornado on record, 2.6 miles wide, this tornado. Have you ever heard of such a tornado? Here's another world's strongest recorded storm. This was in 2014. Hurricane Patricia, the strongest storm ever in the Western Hemisphere. How many strongest storms can you have? Here's Toronto. You might remember this, a record-breaking rainstorm called Unprecedented. Here's 2014. Insane flooding hits Arizona after record-breaking rain, more record-breaking weather. Here's a space view of the Mississippi River's record-breaking flooding. This was 2016. Historic Texas wildfire season has shattered all previous records. California's worst drought in history. Central Texas drought is worst on record. And take a look at this. So we have super darn put into place, circling the large area around the Arctic North, around the North Pole. And then we start hearing about freak storms pushing the North Pole 50 degrees above normal. That's kind of strange, isn't it? And along with that, with the temperature going up by so much, it says from Tuesday evening to Wednesday morning, a mind-boggling pressure drop was recorded in Iceland. 54 millibars in just 18 hours. This triples the criteria for bomb cyclogenesis, which meteorologists use to describe a rapidly intensifying mid-latitude storm. A bomb cyclone is defined as dropping 1 millibar per hour for 24 hours. If anybody knows of a bomb cyclone being mentioned in the news before 2015, please let me know, because I've not been able to find one occurrence of a bomb cyclone mentioned until this one that is 3 times the criteria for a so-called bomb cyclone. We have more. Here is a super-darn ionospheric array beaming energy into the ionosphere. Could all this energy being beamed into the ionosphere, do this? Create this rapid increase in temperature and drop the air pressure. Now, how this works is when you heat anything, it expands, right? So when they are able to use this vast array to beam electromagnetic energy into the ionosphere, it can cause the ionosphere to stretch. So it goes up. So what happens to the air pressure when that happens? The air pressure goes down, right? Because the air is not pushing down on it as quickly. And of course, it is a rapid drop in air pressure that defines bomb cyclones and thunder snow and other strange things that we haven't heard of before until just recently. Here's some of them. This was just this year, a catastrophic bomb cyclone in the Midwest. And it, of course, is causing great problems now, massive flooding all across America's bread basket. If you wanted to attack America's economy, where would you strike America? And how would you strike America? Especially if you wanted to get away with it. The technology exists to cause this. And really, when have we had bomb cyclones in the Midwest ever? I looked this up, and there were a few pages about bomb cyclones. And you know, usually when you search, we'll go back a long time. With this, it only goes back a year or two of bomb cyclones, and you can't find any earlier than that. Here's a YouTube search I did, and in 22 pages of YouTube results, I couldn't find a single mention of a bomb cyclone older than a year. So when you hear these people talking in the news about bomb cyclones, they talk about it as if it's the morning rainstorm or something that we've been having for years. Yet this is not borne out in all of our searches that we can do on the internet. This is a relatively new thing. So we wonder, why is all of this happening? Well, what I have stated back in 2008 about these horsemen is that this is actually all about global government, basically breaking down the will of the population to make us believe that we need them to solve these problems. If you want to create the idea that there's such a thing as global warming or climate change, why not just use environmental technological means to create it. And of course, what that's all about is financing for the United Nations and their program and their bid for global government. There is a showdown coming up, a showdown with Yeshua Messiah. And the other reason why they're being let loose on the world is because this is part of Yahweh's plan to gather the remnant. And as we see this progress, we'll understand this more. Well, that's the red horse rider. Now we have the third seal removed. And what is that one? That's the black horse rider. When he opened the third seal, I heard the third live thing saying, "Come and see, and behold a black horse, and he who sat on it had a balance in his hand. I heard a voice in the midst of the four live things saying, a konix of wheat for a denarius, and 3 konix of barley for a denarius. Don't damage the oil and the wine." In a program that aired in July of 2008, this is what I said. This black horse rider is headed for your town, headed for where you live. This rider is headed in your direction, and you need to hear the message so that you can deal with what's coming. This black horse goes out on the west wind. It's fair to say that this suggests that the crisis that this black horse rider represents originates in the west. What it's actually talking about is an economic crisis. Now, this was in the summer that we gave this warning on our radio program, and in the fall, we got this. An economic crisis, a global economic crisis. And I'm sure you remember that. What many of us in the West might not know is that in the 8 years since 2008, 67 plus million people starved to death in the world as a result of the economic crisis. That's a lot of people. This is based on the statistics at stopthehunger.com. You probably remember Bernanke. He said September and October of 2008 was the worst financial crisis in global history, including the Great Depression. Do you think that qualifies as the black horse rider? In 2008, the fourth seal was also removed by Yeshua. The fourth seal is the pale horse rider. His name was Death. Sheol followed with him. He's called the pale horse in our translations, but the word actually refers to a shade of green, kind of a sick shade of green. He's given authority over 1/4 of the earth to kill with the sword, with famine, with death, and by the wild animals of the earth was given to him. Here's what I said in my radio program in 2008 about this horse. The north here really typifies the enemies of Israel. What 1/4 of the earth could be here is the Muslim world. In fact, the Muslim world is about 1/4 of the earth's population. This pale horse who is let loose into the north is really let loose against these Muslim nations. The more vehement and hateful they are in their attacks against Israel, the more devastating this pale horse rider will be against them. This pale horse has been released. An article, a study came out recently, which indicates that the global war on terror has killed 4 million Muslims or more. And this is not over. We still have ahead of us the conclusion to the Psalm 83 war, which in fact has been ongoing among the Sunni and Shiites in the Middle East. The destruction of Damascus, prophesied in Scripture, and the destruction of Gog and Gog's Muslim allies in the book of Ezekiel. And all of these things involve massive loss of life. So this pale horse rider obviously continues to ride in the Middle East. That's the 4 horses. Yeshua removed the 5th seal in 2015. Now this is very interesting because 2008 was a Shemitah year, a year of release, when those 4 horsemen were released. And 2015 was a year of release when the 5th seal was removed. The 5th seal is persecution. What is shown here is the martyrs who gave their lives for Messiah. And then we're told that they must wait until the number of their fellow servants and their brethren who were to be killed, even as they had been, would be completed also. So the 5th seal unleashes persecution of believers. August 22nd, 2008, this is what I said about the 5th seal. I think the time we're talking about in the 5th seal is different because I believe it's speaking about global conditions. Not until our modern times was that even possible. I believe these verses are actually talking about a time of global persecution, not just regional persecution. And that's what's so different about it, and why we will experience that for the first time in modern times during this 5th seal. It's global persecution of believers. In this DVD set in 2015, entitled War on the Saints, I announced that the 5th seal of Revelation had been opened, meaning that unprecedented persecution of believers around the globe is upon us. Was that accurate? Well, first, before we get into this, let's talk about believers. What are believers? Some people would say, well, Christians aren't believers. Others would say Messianics aren't believers. But those who persecute believers don't care about doctrinal differences between Messianics and Christians. They'll gladly kill either under either label. So definitely the persecution of Christians applies to Messianics just as well, because the people that kill people who are part of the Christian church certainly would kill Messianics too for holding very similar beliefs as they see it. With that in mind, let's look at Christian persecution now since 2015 when the seal was opened. Franklin Graham points out that the persecution of Christians is escalating. And it's interesting, he says this is being driven especially by progressives, LGBT activists, and the anti-God forces of secularism. It's interesting that in the DVDs where I announced the 5th seal, it's talking about exactly those issues and how that would be the factor that would let this loose. The Jerusalem Post informs us of the persecution of Christians in China being at a record high. And you probably have seen some of the videos of churches being torn down, and those that would not register with the state, where believers are actually being put in prison, some for long periods of time. Just recently, we had the Sri Lanka attacks with a death toll of 257 or more. These were against churches in Sri Lanka. And obviously, this is persecution. What about the historic attack on Notre Dame? Now, they tell us this is an accident. And yet, it's also reported that nearly 2,000 Christian churches in France have been desecrated in the last 2 years. So it makes it hard to believe that this biggest attack of all was an accident. You know, this is suppressed. It seems like anything that is reported that might involve Muslim persecution of believers is suppressed. So you may not know just how extensive this is, but it is extremely extensive. Here at Christian Persecution News, it has news items that you can look at related to persecution of believers. And for instance, it has worldwide, churches have become the #1 target for hate attacks. It mentions the Sri Lanka massacre. It mentions bombings. It mentions Nigeria. There's been a lot of persecution there and killings there. And these routinely get ignored. This was a very interesting article entitled, "All the Religious Massacres You Didn't Hear About Over the Past Year Have One Thing in Common: Christians were killed instead of Muslims." And this is going on a wide scale. Sometime you should look up the map, perhaps on Google Images, of Muslims with death sentences for Christians. And it's an amazing map. It will give you some idea of how extensively Christians are being killed in Muslim lands. We don't know about all of those deaths. So keep that in mind as you look at this article from March of this year. 11 Christians are killed every day for their faith. And I should add, I came across articles that said that the persecution going on against Christians today is unprecedented. It's worse than all time, even what you've heard in the history books about Rome. It's more extensive today even than that. And of course, it continues to grow. We have this article, for example, Christians get ready for persecution in the West. And there's growing anti-Bible fervor in the West. And believers are really seen as an obstacle to where society wants to go, an obstacle that needs to be removed. So the fifth seal, having been removed, is really ominous. And unlike the first 4 seals that were removed in rapid succession, and of course, those horses are still riding, this one lasts for a long time before another happens. So how bad will this get, this persecution? Well, Yeshua told us, and he's talking about this time period, you will be handed over even by parents, brothers, relatives, and friends. They will cause some of you to be put to death. You will be hated by all men for my name's sake, and not a hair of your head will perish. By your endurance, you will win your lives. Now, sometimes when believers in the West read something like this, they think, oh, well, this is going to happen during the tribulation. And no doubt it will. But the fifth seal being removed means this is really going to be happening even before we get to the tribulation. And indeed, it is happening right now in many places around the world. It just hasn't gotten here to that extent in the West. But trust me, it's coming. Well, now we get to the sixth seal. And as I say, this is not coming as quickly as happened with the first four seals. Yeshua has not yet removed the sixth seal. But we wonder what will happen when he does remove the sixth seal. I looked when he broke the sixth seal, and there was a great earthquake. And the sun became black as sackcloth made of hair, and the whole moon became like blood, and the stars of the sky fell to the earth, as a fig tree casts its unripe figs when shaken by a great wind. The sky was split apart as if a scroll when it is unrolled, and every mountain and island were moved out of their places. Now that sounds pretty severe, doesn't it? Doesn't that sound like the end of the world? Some people read that and they think that must be the very end. Let's see what the scriptures say about this. Joel chapter 2 talks about these same celestial phenomenon. And there it talks about blood, fire, and pillars of smoke. The sun will be turned into darkness and the moon into blood. Exactly the same sign as the sixth seal. It says before the great and terrible day of Yahweh comes. It doesn't happen at the great and terrible day of Yahweh. It happens before. It's the sixth seal, not the seventh seal. And it says it will happen that whoever will call on the name of Yahweh shall be saved. For in Mount Zion and in Jerusalem there will be those who escape, as Yahweh has said, and among the remnant, those whom Yahweh calls. So, even though we have this very severe thing that's going to happen when the sixth seal is removed, you notice the remnant are in a safe place when this happens. It says that they escape. In Jerusalem and Mount Zion, we're talking about Israel, they have a place of escape. The remnant of Israel. Well, some questions come up about how this is possible. The sun becoming black sounds like a solar eclipse, doesn't it? But the whole moon becoming as blood, that's typical of a lunar eclipse, a red moon. And yet when we look at how these two things occur, it could cause you to scratch your head. If you look here at the picture of a solar eclipse, you notice that in a solar eclipse, the moon is placed in between the sun and the earth. But in a lunar eclipse, the earth is in between the sun and the moon. And the moon is, in this case, behind the earth. So how could you have a solar eclipse and a lunar eclipse at the same time? Well, I've had people tell me that's not possible. But you know what? I found out how it is possible. Would you like to see? This is how it's possible. It takes another object in between the sun and the earth in order for the sun to be obscured. And then you can have a black sun and a red eclipse moon. And you notice it mentions the sun became black like sackcloth made of hair. Well, I put a picture here for you of what camel hair sackcloth looks like. Notice that fuzziness? If you look at the sun in an eclipse, you notice it has that same fuzzy look around it? It really is talking about the sun being eclipsed. It has to be talking about a celestial object from space that is impeding the view of the sun at the same time that there is an ongoing eclipse of the moon. And this is a sign mentioned in Joel and then mentioned here as the sixth seal in Revelation 6. Here's some other things. It says the sky was split apart as if a scroll when it is unrolled. Here's how you can understand this. Notice in this first pane, we have a scroll that's partially unrolled. In the second pane, it's unrolled further. We could imagine that being the same table. And then on the third instance, it's unrolled and practically covers the whole table. And it's as if then the edges are being split apart. Well, we have an example here of what this might look like with this heavenly body as it gets closer to the earth. The closer it comes to the earth, the more the heavens seem to be pushed apart. This is what is being predicted in Revelation 6 at the release of the sixth seal. It says, stars of the sky fell to the earth as a fig tree casts its unripe figs. It mentions further in the wind. So just imagine a fruit tree shaking in the wind and the fruit falling down. That's what it's talking about. It's a lot like this picture. We don't know the size of these so-called stars. A lot of times the scriptures will speak of anything from the sky as a star because it doesn't use all the modern technical language that we use. So anything that falls from the sky is a star. Where could those stars come from? Well, here's a picture of an asteroid with a debris field. Imagine this huge in size. So therefore, the debris field would have debris in it that's huge in size, and it comes close to the Earth. You certainly can imagine that debris field being attracted by the greater gravity of the Earth, right? And it would be just like figs falling to the earth. Only, I'm pretty sure, a lot worse than figs. Now, it mentions a great earthquake, so great that every mountain and island were moved out of their places. Now, that's a scary earthquake. Here was an interesting thing in Nature Geoscience, a study that was done in 2016. And what they found here is that even, as it says here, we find that very large earthquakes, including the 2004 Sumatran, 2010 Maui earthquake in Chile, and the 2011 Tohoku Oki earthquake in Japan, tend to occur near the time of maximum tidal stress amplitude. So basically what it's saying is the gravity exerting on the earth, represented in the tides, causes earthquakes, large earthquakes on the earth. What if you have an entirely different body that is now interjected between the moon and the earth what will the result of that be on the earth? I don't think it's hard for us to imagine a great earthquake occurring as a result of that, basically causing a ripple in the earth's crust around the entire earth. I'm no scientist, but I certainly can understand that. Well, as I looked into this further, it made me wonder, is there something out there that they're not telling us about? I thought this was an interesting article. NASA scientist says Earth is due for an extinction level event. They have this picture of this giant object from space hitting the Earth. Why would they suggest that to us? Interesting question. And then what about this? Why are all of the elite obsessed with underground bunkers lately? They're all building them. They're all building them. New Zealand is a very popular place for them to build their underground luxury bunkers. Even a lot of ordinary people are building bunkers in their backyard, but nothing like these are. Here's what Revelation 6 says. The kings of the earth, the princes, the commanding officers, the rich, the strong, and every slave and free person hid themselves in the caves and in the rocks of the mountains. They told the mountains and the rocks, fall on us and hide us from the face of him who sits on the throne and from the wrath of the Lamb. For the great day of his wrath has come, and who is able to stand? How interesting. Could all of this bunker building actually be a fulfillment of Revelation 6? Interesting question, isn't it? With all of that going on, it is good for us to remember the promise in Joel. It will happen that whoever will call on the name of Yahweh shall be saved. For in Mount Zion and in Jerusalem there will be those who escape, as Yahweh has said, and among the remnant those whom Yahweh calls. So when these events happen, the remnant will be safe in the land. Yahweh has a place to keep them safe there. No, don't build a bunker under your house. Don't rent a bunker in New Zealand. Be one of his remnant. Trust him. Trust in his name for your safety. Well, next we come to Revelation 7. Now, the interesting thing about Revelation 7 is this is a pause. It's so interesting here because you're left right on the edge of your seat at the end of Revelation 6 with the sixth seal. We know there's one more seal, right? And yet Revelation 7 doesn't talk about the seventh seal, and it doesn't talk about the sixth seal. It's an exegetic pause. In other words, it's pausing here to explain what all of this is about. Don't you want to know what it says? Well, here it goes. It introduces to us there the four angels. Now, we've already met them in Revelation 4 and 5. Here it says, amid this I saw four angels standing at the four corners of the earth, holding the four winds of the earth, so that no wind would blow on the earth or on the sea or on any tree. So those four angels that let loose the four horsemen are also holding back these four winds. And we notice the word here that is used means amid. It doesn't mean after these things. You know, sometimes that's how it's translated, after these things. It doesn't mean after. It means amid or during these things. So it's clearly leaving the chronological order in order to explain things to us about these 6 seals it's just been talking about. So what's been happening all along is these 4 angels are holding back the tribulation while these 4 horsemen are doing their thing in the world. That's what's been happening. We have more about this. It says, holding the 4 winds of the earth so that no wind would blow in the earth or on the sea or on any tree. When we get into Revelation chapter 8, as soon as the tribulation gets started, we find 1/3 of the earth burnt up, of the trees burnt up, of the green grass burnt up, and the sea. So clearly what they're holding back are the 4 winds of the tribulation, because this is what gets hurt immediately when the tribulation starts. It goes on here. It says, I saw another angel ascend from the sunrise, having the seal of the living God. He cried with a loud voice to the 4 angels to whom it was given to harm the earth and the sea, saying, don't harm the earth, neither the sea nor the trees, until we have sealed the bondservants of our God on their foreheads. Well, the first thing right off the bat that we see here is what all this is about is sealing the bond slaves. What the 4 angels are doing here is they're holding back the 4 winds so the bond slaves can be sealed before the tribulation comes. That's very clear from this. But we wonder about this angel who is ascending from the sunrise. He's not descending from heaven like angels usually do. He's ascending from the sunrise. Who is he? Well, here we can go back to the white horse rider. And we learned in Malachi that the white horse rider is called a messenger. And it's interesting that in the Greek there, from the Septuagint Bible, the word that it uses there is angelos, a messenger, which also is used to mean an angel. So this is an angel ascending from the sunrise. This actually is the same as the white horse rider, and he has the seal of the living God, and he is there to seal the bond slaves. It's telling you more about why this white horse rider was sent out into the world and what his purpose is. This has to do with gathering the bond slaves. Now we have more about this here as we continue. It says, I heard the number of those who were sealed, 144,000, sealed out of every tribe of the sons of Israel. And then it names them out of each tribe. So there are various explanations of this, but you know, strangely, very few of them say this has anything to do with Israel. And that to me is pretty ridiculous, because not only does it say that they're sealed out of every tribe of the sons of Israel, but then it goes to the extreme of actually naming each of the tribes and how many come from each tribe. And in doing that, by the way, it is imitating the book of Numbers, numbering the armies of Israel. This is the remnant of Israel. It is, in fact, the leaders of the remnant of Israel. And this is what this period of the opening of these 6 seals is about, is sealing up this remnant. And we wonder, for what purpose? Well, we have more here about all of this. Isaiah 11 through 16 is one of many places where it talks about this gathering of the remnant in the last days. It says it will happen in that day that Yahweh will recover the remnant that is left of his people. He will set up a banner for the nations and will assemble the outcasts of Israel and gather together the dispersed of Judah from the four corners of the earth. Four winds, four corners. There will be a highway for the remnant, like there was for Israel in the day that he came up out of the land of Egypt. There is an exodus of the remnant of Israel from all the nations of the world back to their home in Israel, as happened when Israel came up out of Egypt, only much greater. That's what's envisioned. There's so many verses like this. Let me give you another one. Therefore, behold, the days come, says Yahweh, that they shall no more say, as Yahweh lives, who brought up the children of Israel out of the land of Egypt, but as Yahweh lives, who brought up and who led the seed of the house of Israel out of the north country and from all the countries where I had driven them. They shall dwell in their own land. Is there anything about they shall dwell in their own land that you don't understand? It's so simple. Why don't people even know this? It's so simple. The tribes of Israel were scattered throughout the earth. They were assimilated into the nations. And in the last days, Yahweh is turning his attention to their descendants, many of whom do not even know they're Israelites, and nonetheless, he is gathering them. These, indeed, are overcomers, and he is bringing them back to their own land. That's what it's talking about when it's talking about the 144,000. Well, now it goes on and it talks about a great multitude. It says, amid this I looked, and behold, a great multitude which no man could number, out of every nation and of all tribes, peoples, and languages, standing before the throne and before the Lamb, dressed in white robes with palm branches in their hands. They cried with a loud voice, saying, salvation be to our God who sits on the throne and to the Lamb. What does this mean? Essentially, it means that the harvest of the earth can only be finished after the remnant of Israel are returned to the land. The things that Yahweh is planning to do with the remnant of Israel is what will create the possibility for people of all the nations to be harvested from the earth, a great multitude. That's what it's talking about. It says, these are those who came out of the Great Tribulation. So that's what's going to happen down the road. You see, the remnant come out during this period before the tribulation, and then during the tribulation is when this great multitude comes out of all the nations. That's what it is showing us in Revelation 7. We'll look at Isaiah 10, 20 through 23. It explains this further. It says, it will come to pass in that day that the remnant of Israel shall lean on Yahweh, the Holy One of Israel, in truth. A remnant will return, even the remnant of Jacob, to the mighty God. For though your people Israel are like the sand of the sea, only a remnant of them will return. A destruction is determined, overflowing with righteousness. For Yahweh, Yahweh of hosts, will make a full end, and that determined in the midst of all the earth. So we're talking here about life and death issues. We're talking about this return of the remnant happening before this destruction happens. It's very close in timing. And this is exactly what the picture in Revelation is explaining to us. Friends, if you get this, you have to realize you need to do what it takes to be part of this remnant, to be able to return in the remnant exodus. Well, next we get to Revelation 8, to the final seal being removed, and the tribulation begins. When the Lamb broke the seventh seal, there was silence in heaven for about half an hour. And I saw the seven angels who stand before God, and seven trumpets were given to them. Now, I want you to notice something. What you've seen up until now is a closed scroll. What you're looking at now is an open scroll. The reason is because all the seals have been removed. The breaking of the seventh seal allows the scroll to be opened. What's inside the scroll? The judgments against the nations. It's the Great Tribulation that begins when the scroll is open. So what happens with each of the six seals is before the tribulation, because the scroll isn't open yet. The seventh seal is opened, and now what you've got when the scroll opens is the Great Tribulation, when the wicked are being judged. Now, take a look at this. This is basically the literary structure of the book of Revelation. So at the top, we have the scrolls that have been removed. And you can see there that after it tells us about six seals, that's when it has the pause where it's explaining to us what that was all about. Then the seventh seal is opened, and now with the scroll open, we can see the structure that's within the scroll. You have seven trumpets. After the sixth trumpet, you have an exegetic pause, as you had with the seals, explaining what's going on here with all these trumpets. You also have seven bowls of wrath being poured out. And this is poured out after six of the trumpets. So here, this is when things are becoming much more intense with these bowls of wrath being poured out. We have an exegetic pause there after the sixth bowl. And then finally we have the seventh bowl. So that's basically the structure in there of how the judgments unfold from this point forward in the tribulation. And finally, what we have in verse 19 through 22 is the triumph of the Lamb, the return of Messiah, and the triumph of the overcomers with him in the kingdom. That's what you have. So you have the overcomers figuring very prominently throughout all of Revelation. It starts out basically bringing them out of the religious system. Then you have one of the overcomers that essentially is leading the way for the rest. Then you have the remnant who, of course, are drawn out of the overcomers. Not all of them return, right? It's overcomers that return. And then finally, of course, through the tribulation, we also see the overcomers. They're watching from heaven everything that happens with the overcomers. Finally, when Messiah returns at the end, they are united with him and they share in the victory and receive all of the rewards that are from the beginning of the book of Revelation. So that's basically what happens with the book of Revelation, how it's structured, and how it moves. have a few things to talk about. You no doubt have heard about Apophis. Yes, it is the name of an Egyptian false god, but it's also the name of a very big rock that is headed towards the earth. And it is predicted by NASA to have a very close encounter with the earth in the year 2029, and then later again, even a closer encounter in 2036, 7 years apart. 2029 is a Shemitah year. And from other chronology we've done, I think we all know that's very important. But we shouldn't worry about it because NASA would tell us if there was any problem. We also should note when we get into Revelation 8, we pick up the thread again, of the seals. It immediately has the trumpets, and as soon as the trumpets start blowing, it says, hail and fire mixed with blood is thrown to the earth. The second angel sounded, and a great burning mountain was thrown into the sea. The third angel sounded, and a great star fell from the sky. A lot of falling from heaven here, just as this large celestial object is passing by the earth. That doesn't sound too symbolic to me anymore, especially knowing we're going to have a large object passing by. Another thing that's interesting is this that I found on one of the NASA websites, telling us about Apophis, also known as Apep the Destroyer. Apophis is the Egyptian god of evil and destruction who dwelled in eternal darkness. As a result of its passage within 40,000 kilometers of the Earth on 2029, April 13, this minor planet will move from Aten to the Apollo class. I don't know about you, but this thing being called a minor planet is not really reassuring to me. What do you think? This is coming up. There's nothing you can do to stop this. Now, you know what? There's lots of plans to stop this. China has come up with a plan. The Russians came up with a plan. Just recently, NASA met to try to come up with a plan. But so far, there's nothing actually happening that can deal with this. Of course, what NASA is saying is this isn't dangerous. So it makes me wonder why all these countries are trying to come up with a plan. But what do I know? One other thing I want to say is that we're going to do a teaching on the rest of Revelation at an appropriate time in the future. We're not doing it right now because we've got all we can handle, don't we? With what's going to happen between now and the tribulation. And I think that's really what we need to keep focusing on. And we're waiting for the sixth seal. You heard what that's about, right? How important is it to understand the message of the remnant and the remnant exodus and to do something about it? How important is it? You heard about the other seals and what has actually happened. Do you think that all of that would happen, fulfilling those seals, and then when the sixth seal happened, nothing would happen? In the beginning of Revelation, it says these are the things that must happen. They are unfolding. This will happen. This is going to be earth-shaking. Literally. The whole earth is going to shake. Can you imagine how you're going to feel on that day when there's such a large celestial object coming near the earth that it's actually darkening the sun and causing the earth to shake, and debris actually falling from the sky. This is a real thing that's going to happen. You know, unlike these other seals, or most of them except for the first one, so like seal 2 through 5, all of that is bad stuff the world is doing, right? Seal 6 is Yahweh showing the world his power. Nothing's going to stop that. No plan that they're going to hatch in China is going to stop that. No idea of Donald Trump is going to stop that. The Russians aren't going to stop that. Whether it's Apophis or something else, even worse, it's going to happen. A celestial object is headed here right now. And it seems like it's roughly 10 years away. Here's a video that Dawn made, which we showed with our Daniel seminar.
America has failed. The church is in apostasy. There are countless contradictory voices. We are in the end days. The beast of Daniel is surfacing. What do you do? When do you do it? The voice of Zion in exile is here with a crystal clear word.
Go, my son, take with you all my power, dominion, and authority. Wreak havoc on the enemy, make many more like you. Put this in your memory that in big, bold words that an enemy came to destroy you. Now it's time to wreak havoc on his kingdom. You're commanding my army. You are my commander. The next word he gave me was authority, governance with power. You shall lead many people with this authority, for there is a position. I am bringing my children back to my land where all authority is given. No one earns this unless they earn this through my will. Your authority is to lead them back, and you will. What I see is almost like a seal in a book or a stamp that you've given authority to open up and grant or sealed up. It's pure authority. He's giving you that, and your name's written in a book, and this is your position.
I'm not showing that to you to tell you about me. I'm showing that to you because with such a short time ahead of us, you have to know where to go to get the information you need. Now, those people who are first hearing this, you already know our message, or you're looking into it. But this message is going to go out further than our group here, and this can be shared with other people. And to any of those people, I ask you, who else can explain the book of Revelation like I just explained it to you? What other explanation have you heard of all of the crazy stuff that has been going on that explains it all? Doesn't this explain it? There's a story that goes along with that prophetic word in which it was stated that I am Messiah's commander of this mission to lead the remnant exodus home to our place of safety in Israel. And you know what? I just accept that. That's too big a thing. It can do too big a mind trip to go into it beyond simply accepting it as true. So I just accept it as true. It's a responsibility I have. So having that responsibility, I have to tell you about it. Because so much is at stake, as I have shared here tonight. So this is my closing message. The remnant exodus will occur at the Lord's command between 2022 and 2029 before the sixth seal is unleashed. So I invite you to get on board at zion.net and start getting ready right now. Let's pray. Our Father, you are the source of all revelation. That scroll was in your hand from before the founding of the world. You know the end from the beginning. You have the answers for why the world is getting so completely crazy. And it's all set out in your book. Father, thank you for the things that you are doing to reach your remnant people here in these last days. Thank you, Father, for turning your heart and your face back towards your remnant to fulfill all the words of the prophets, to gather your people here in these last days before the tribulation descends. Father, I just want to pray that this message will go out and will be heard by those people who need to hear it, that, Father, that they can act swiftly and act very decisively as overcomers in order to get up to speed with the things they need to know to be ready for changes that are going to happen very rapidly, Father. I just want to pray for your remnant wherever they are throughout the world tonight. And I pray, Father, for you to gather them no matter whatever corner or crevice of this earth they're at, and to bring them into your fold. And Father, that you just might get your people ready for the remnant exodus. And Father, I pray in the name of our Messiah, Yeshua. Amen.
Was this video informative? Remember to hit the like button to help spread the word, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notifications button so you'll get updates on all the great content coming from Eliyahu Ben David.
For whatever things were written before were written for our learning, that we, through the patience and comfort of the Scriptures, might have hope. You know, the apostles, they were Torah scholars. This is why I'm doing Zion Academy. The lessons include 2-hour audio programs and quiz modules. All the lessons in the Torah can be applied to us today. Not to mention, they open up the renewed covenant scriptures in a whole new level, much like the apostles had understanding of the Torah. Plus, I can do the courses in my own time, at my own pace, with no prerequisites, and at a very low cost. I can do them here. Or here.
Zion Academy students are provided with study materials, the Zion Messianic Scriptures, in-depth verse-by-verse programs, and quizzes with your final grade and a certificate at the end of the course. Zion Academy also offers assignments for students who would like to opt in to take part in Zion Tabernacle Live Sabbath meetings. Become immersed in the Torah. Sign up at zion.net today for your free trial.